story of familial Alzheimer's disease goes back a few decades now in terms of finding genes, but people had recognized from the 1920s or 30s that there were families where people had this young onset Alzheimer's disease, and that particularly in big families it was more obvious. There might be, let's say, 8 brothers and sisters, and 4 of them would develop Alzheimer's disease at a young age. So people recognized 100 years ago that Alzheimer's disease in rare cases could be familial. The science really has taken off in the last decade or two. First, a gene called amyloid precursor protein, APP, was found, and then after a few more years, in quick succession, 2 more very similar genes called presenilin, so young onset really is where the name came from, 1 and 2 more genes. So there are 3 genes that if you have a mistake in those genes, it will cause Alzheimer's disease, usually at a predictable and usually at a young age. What familial Alzheimer's disease and those discoveries have given us is so much understanding about Alzheimer's disease more generally. There's been a huge step forward for the field. So, for example, the first animal models of Alzheimer's disease were created by taking the genes that had been found in these families and putting them into transgenic animals to be able to understand more about the cell biology. And that's happening in cell cultures and in transgenic animals. It's taught us that the genes are involved in the process that causes a protein called amyloid to be deposited in people's brains. And this protein is indigestible to the brain, so it gradually builds up, and if you like, sort of the brain increasingly gets clogged up with this toxic protein that it can't break down, called amyloid. And actually, Alzheimer himself, 100 years ago, he looked down the microscope, and the beginning of the last century saw these lumps of protein, and it was only with the genetic discoveries that we've understood more about how that process may work, at least in the families. And what people think, but we can't be certain, is the process in typical Alzheimer's disease is very closely related. We don't really know that. So it's helped our understanding of the disease, it's given us models that we can study to find therapies, and finally it's leading to trials in people who have got familial Alzheimer's disease.